Hey everyone, once again, Kelly here, and today I have Marcus Grant from MS Grant Music. We're going to be chatting about how Marcus left his non-music job, woohoo, by attracting ideal students and raising his rate. Marcus is a composer, a fantastic trumpet player and teacher, and so many other incredible things. And I'm just so excited to be talking today. So thank you again for your time. But before I get just completely sucked into all the exciting things, why don't we have you just kind of briefly introduce yourself in the studio and tell me a little bit more about who you work with in your teaching?
Yeah, awesome. My name is Marcus Grant, and it is the pleasure is mine to be here. It's been really exciting, and I hopefully I'm going to mention it now so I don't forget because you know how I am. I'm very excited about topics, but I mean I'm very excited to kind of just talk generally about like how we met.
Yeah.
And then through the process of how we came to be able to you know have the opportunity to work together. It's been a really big pleasure. And the reason why I start with that is because when you asked with like who I work with, right? And I like to tell people that I'm very spoiled, but also I kind of almost hand select the type of people that I like to work with. I look for specific qualities. Trust is a really big thing for me. People who have the passion and good nature and who have a desire of serving people. So I'm a professor at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. A lot of my colleagues were professors of mine because I was a student there. So it's really great and rewarding. They're very supportive and encouraging, but they're also just really great people, So
Mm.
just really great teachers and then really great people. It's a real big joy to work there. When we first met, I was working at, of course, a non-music job that I had really great coworkers and a great boss. So that environment was really supportive as well, which I'm very thankful for. And then when I teach my students, I have been able to, and I know we're going to talk probably quite a bit about this, but I was able to build not just a studio that is of a size that is necessary to pay my bills, which is obviously really important, but
Yeah.
um, the type of students that are a fit for my style of teaching so that I can ensure that I am giving them everything they need to be successful. And I can ensure that they're getting everything that I have to offer, which is um, which is something that I haven't always been as diligent trying to find
Mm.
as I am now. And I think that's probably true for most of us, especially when you first graduate. It's one of those the adage is like accept all work, anyone who will pay
Right.
you, and that type of thing. But it's very easy to get burnt out pretty quickly when you are and again, we're not talking about like good students or bad students, but students that are
Right.
not a fit with your teaching. If you have a specific goal for students and their goal is entirely different, then a lot of times the things that you share, you might as well be talking to a wall. and
Unfortunately, yes.
yeah, and that's not good for the teacher or the student.
No,
So
no.
yeah, the type of person I've worked with is the type of person who is um, just really passionate, a really good nature. A lot of them want to major in music in college
Mm.
themselves, which is really cool. But certainly the type of students that are wanting to do honor bands, that are wanting to be leadership, get leadership positions in their marching band or their jazz band or their show choir band and that type of thing, and just not knowing necessarily where to start or wanting to just reach their full potential after they already knew how to start. So um, those students have been great and incredible. It's been a pleasure to work with them.
Oh, that's amazing. And you have so much to offer. I mean, obviously you have a professor position. You're also very active in the trumpet community with even some new projects. So let's take a moment and just talk about that because again, I want to paint this picture. You are bringing a lot to the table. And yet when we started working together at the beginning, we didn't have a lot of private students. And this was, I think, a lot of where the frustration was sitting when we had our first couple conversations about this. Like,
Yeah,
I know I have things to offer to these students. I know I'm bringing so much to lessons as you're talking about. Like there's so much that you can provide to them.
yeah.
Why are they not finding me? Like what is the disconnect here? So talk a little bit more about your involvement in the trumpet community and what it is that you are giving back already before
Sure,
these students were added.
sure. So I am a first of all, I'm a content creator. I like to make YouTube videos and Instagram reels and TikTok videos. And a lot of my content is me being playful with my career and also just showing people what I like. So as a
Yeah.
professional musician, most of us are classically trained. Um, that over huge umbrella that we call classical that encompasses like 82 genres. But anyway, a
And
classically
that number's
trained
growing
musician
every day, it feels like.
every
Which is a
day.
good problem to
But
have. Good problem to have.
yes, but I do that. But also, obviously, I mean, like when you major in music, it's because you love music, and that doesn't just mean
Yeah.
classical music. So I put a lot of non-classical pieces like arrangements, trumpet ensemble, multi-track specifically on my page, and then sometimes I will answer comments about questions and give a little bit of an insight into my career. So that's where I feel like I'm the most active with you know my community because it's right there. I mean, like it's just a comment away and that type of thing. I do
Yeah.
travel occasionally to teach guest artist master classes and whatnot, and I am currently right now serving on the board of directors for the National Trumpet Competition. So, and I help to run their the media side of things and curate some content. But I'm also just a general member at large. So, I go to the competition, and last year I judged a couple of divisions. I judged the finals division this particular time, which was really, really fun. But
That's
being
so
able to
cool.
see all of the students around and to work with them and to see their passions and desires and where they're going. That was a really incredible, meaningful, and uplifting thing. And then we get to see a lot of those students that go to that level. We get to see their successes, like where are they going
Mm.
afterwards? What jobs are they getting? Did they really achieve the passion they were looking for? And we're in a very unique position where we can help them do that. And it's the best. It really is. It's so much fun. Um,
That is so cool.
so I do that, and then I do what I can. Up until this last season, I've been teaching with a marching band, and the school that is almost literally down the street. It's like a 10-minute walk from
Oh
my
my gosh,
apartment.
that's nice.
And then the school next closest to that as well. I've done some teaching with their marching bands pretty up until pretty recently, which was a ton of fun. So just most opportunities I can find to work with students and to serve people. That's really what I'm all about when it comes to music. And no matter what my career, where my career goes, I just want to be able to give people the tools that they need.
Mm.
If they want to be the best in the world at what they do, then I'll be darned if they don't get there because they didn't have the tools and I could have done something about it. So I'm going to give them what they need and then let them decide what they want to do. Anyway.
That's amazing. I admire your passion so much, and it's something that and I know we're going to talk about the story of how we met here in a second too, but we met through social media, and that was something I was attracted to. And I guess just kind of get right into it. The way that Marcus and I met was because I was creating content, and he had this trending sound that was going around, and I feel like it was kind of early on the trend, if I can toot my own horn on that one a little bit. But I found this great sound
You were,
about
because
practice.
yeah. I found you and I followed you, and sorry, it was early on the trend.
And it was really cool because I mean it was this great video about practice. Like, how did you get so good? Practice. And it's like this very pointed, very entertaining sound. You did such a great job with that. And we had repurposed that for our content. And that was, I think, almost a year before we actually started talking about the studio. Close to. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of became social media friends. Like, we were just liking each other's stuff, and a little bit of hype here and there is kind of what was happening. But Marcus puts out great content, and so if nothing else from this conversation, like, please go follow him on social media. I mean, it's an inspiration to see what you're putting out, and it's just very, very relevant for students and for musicians of all stages and ages. But I also think you just do such a great job on your content of mixing the playing and the arrangements with educational content. And that can be hard to do for musicians. So just, again, like, building you up in that regard, it's phenomenal content.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And part of your journey and part of that frustration, I think, about 6 months ago when we first started talking about the studio, was that too. Like, I've got 20,000 followers on TikTok. Where are the students? Like, what is happening? What's the missing piece of the puzzle? Is that a pretty accurate sentiment for 6 months ago?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I remember I shared because we had known each other via social media for about a year or so.
Yeah.
It was a very long process of me saying, I know what she does, I know what she's about, and I trust what it is that she's offering, and
Mm.
I'm gonna share something. So I don't, I don't know if you remember, like when I first decided to meet with you, I was like, I'm gonna share what happened with my studio because I had a studio.
Yeah.
I was teaching. So again, go back to the whole like quote anyone who will pay me is your ideal student type of deal when
Uh-huh.
you graduate college, which is I think was a mistake.
Mm.
But maybe that's a conversation for later on. But I was able to build. I had at my peak, I had 21 students, private lesson students. But a lot of them were through multi-teacher studio, through a one of the more common instrument distribution companies and whatnot. I don't want to name. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but um, it's very common in music teacher multi-teacher studios to for those businesses to take a really big cut of the profit because they're offering location, they're oftentimes
Yeah.
offering marketing, etc.
The
So I was
overhead's big there.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes total sense, but it's
yes,
not advantageous.
so I was charging significantly less than what I was worth. And then a significant amount of that was being taken for the company to run and continue to do what they do. So I was teaching 21 students and I wasn't able to pay my monthly bills.
Mm.
And that was that was kind of tough. And to be fair, some of them were half-hour lessons, about a third of them were half-hour lessons, about two-thirds were hour lessons. And then I did have a couple of those students I taught privately, but I went and I drove to their houses. So there was a lot of things, there was a lot of
Mm.
time that I put forward that wasn't accounted for.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, I mean, the policy in the multi-teacher studio, that particular studio was one that didn't have much in place for if a student didn't show up, other than like if they didn't give the 24 hours in advance, then you got to keep the money from the lesson, which is sure fine, I guess, but teachers don't do music for the money anyway, so
Right.
it's not like, oh, this is okay. Right? It's
Right.
really disappointing to prepare emotionally and logistically for a student and have the student not show up, or for them to show up and forget their instrument or their music or both. um, and that happened to be a
Mhm.
fairly common thing with a number of my students, and I loved all of my students, but again, it was one of those things where it after a while being having to manage that was tough. um,
Mm.
COVID happened and I lost every single student that I had, like everyone, not all instantly, but it was about a 9-month period or so. And so the part that I remember sharing with you, Kelly, was that I had just met my now wife, and we fell in love, and all the great and wonderful stories, that came with that, and we shared a lot of really great and amazing memories. But I remember thinking to myself, getting married and hopefully starting a family in the future, I want to be able to accomplish this goal of being able to
Mm.
sustain myself as a musician. And I felt like I was almost there. And then when I lost everything, there was a lot of really tough emotions around that. The
Yeah.
finances obviously were really tough, but the idea that I put so much work into building my studio to where it was, and that I had felt I was finally at the position where I could start curating that studio, and supporting myself, and being able to make a living. And all of that was gone because of a situation that was entirely out of my control.
Yeah.
That was very defeating. So looking back on it, I think a part of the culture of coming back post COVID, and the culture of just not being used to playing your instrument outside of band was part of it. But also part of it, I think, was really the emotional side of, I've spent so many years and so much effort and so much money on my degrees and all of that. And just, the flip of a hat, it was all gone. And I look back on it logistically, and of course, I mean, like, that's how I felt. But I still had my knowledge, I still had my experience, and I still had my content, and I still had, a lot of things. But that was really tough. And to kind of add insult to injury, the particular college job I was working at that particular instance, actually ended up letting me go. So I ended up
Mm.
losing my college job about a year after COVID. After that 9 months of slowly losing all of my students, regardless of how hard I tried to keep them. So it was just a really hard time. And when I reached out to you, I knew it was like, I need to build this back up, but I need to build it up the right way. That if
Mm,
something happens again, um, that there are things in place that I can at least support myself and support those I love, and not have to deal with that skyscraper crashing down that
yeah.
happened, when COVID came.
I mean, it was a rough few years for everyone, but to hear, I remember that first conversation um, over Messenger, and then obviously you'd filled out the form on our website and everything too, and shared more detail. And um, I remember when this came through, and I don't think we ever talked about this, but I was actually at my parents' house. I think it was over a weekend, and I sat there and I read it. I read it again, and I brought Isaac over, and we read it together again. And the first thing I think I actually vocalized was, I'm just really shocked because, like, I see you on social media all the time, and you're this wonderful, positive, bubbly human with just like all of the warmth and passion in the world. No one would have ever known you were going through all of that, and that was how you were feeling, that you were feeling so defeated because you were still putting out like this beautiful quality, entertaining, funny, like great content. And it was just like a punch in the gut to me to hear you share all of that, because like, A, that's not what you want for anyone, but also we felt connected and we felt friendly, and it was really hard to hear that was what you were experiencing, the emotions that you were having. When we did started talking about this process, I also remember thinking, like, we're only a few degrees away from something really great. Like, you have a social media presence, like we have other things going for us, you have connections in the community, you're teaching at VCU. And I think our conversation was, maybe we're just not asking for enough. Like, we're not telling people what we need, and no one knows you have openings for lessons. I think that was like our big kind of overarching conversation. We're not talking about lessons. We're not talking about the business. We're not talking about what we can offer and how people can work with us. So they see content, it's entertaining, and they like it, and they follow it, and they comment on it. Maybe they ask a couple questions, but no one's going to your website and booking a trial or a consultation because they just don't know. So our first project was like, make sure everyone knows that we're open for business and we have lesson availability. And that obviously has made an impact. So let's start talking about that journey and transitioning out of that. What were some of the other obstacles that you felt like you had to overcome, whether that was like business wise and organization or marketing, or even some of the mindset of things that you were dealing with?
Yeah. I had to, I think first and foremost, I had to get over the fact that it wasn't a selfish thing for me to communicate what would
Yes.
help me operate at my best version of myself.
Yes.
And that's, and like I mentioned, I'm all about serving individuals, and I had it in my mind because, I mean, obviously we don't have much teaching about finances or money mindset or business and marketing, or anything that helps you to actually grow an audience or grow a studio or grow anything in music other than your own skills, which
Yeah.
is fine. And you can tell by the raise and the inflection of my voice, it's a triggering part for me. I try to give these things to my students so that they can go out and have some of those skills, filter
Yeah.
them in my teaching and whatnot. But it's very difficult as a musician to go out there and learn how to run a business when you don't know anything about how to run a business.
Yeah.
And the one way that you can guarantee people aren't going to take lessons from you is if they don't know that you're teaching lessons. And the way they
Hmm.
won't know is if you don't tell them. It's like lessons are one-on-one. Your students show up with you and they work with you. There's no audience there. They're not going, oh, I see that he's teaching lessons, I want to do that too. So you have to go out there and you have to tell people. So it was really like, from the beginning side of things, it was really just as simple. And one of the things that I was really thankful for is how direct you are with me, like kind and supportive and uplifting. But listen, Marcus, like, you have to do this. If you don't do this, you will not get this result. Like, yes, she's right, I have to trust her and I have to do this. But yeah, so going out, and I mean, first of all, I had some sort of connection with uh, the majority of the band directors in the county. and I was just not going to schools and
Mm,
not doing things. I felt like, oh, I would be bothering them or whatever the case may be.
yeah.
But going out and just like talking to them and just talking in general, let alone visiting, but just talking to them as people, as musicians who have also gotten their degrees and have passions for working with students, even that just made a really big difference because they feel like they can trust me because we have that in common. And then they know that I'm teaching lessons, so when they have a student that wants a lesson and they know someone that they trust, they're going to refer that person. And then of course taking it a step further, going out to the high schools and actually doing sectionals, master classes of sorts, and also I giving them some materials about how I do what I do, and in my case I invited a lot of them to follow me on social media and that type of thing so they could see what I do on a regular basis. It just made it a lot easier for them to see exactly who I was. And so from the marketing standpoint, it was one of those, they just having them understand how much I cared about working with them was the
Yeah.
thing that made people more willing to come to me after this post-COVID struggle that I dealt with my studio and all of that. To know that was my primary desire, that sure I am doing these things at a college and I'm doing these things at a national organization and these things, and maybe you would think, oh, like he's a really busy guy. Listen, everything else goes aside for my students. And the
Mm,
students who work with me, I think, understand that more than ever. But I think the people in their respective communities are understanding that as well, and that by itself has caused a lot of the students to feel more comfortable asking for lessons. And some of them just ask me questions, which is fine too. They ask me questions about certain things and I answer them, and then what often happens is you answer a question, they go and they get the results and they're really happy with it. And they either refer other people to you for lessons or they themselves sign up for lessons. And I had a couple
yes.
of consultations that started that way. It was just like, I'm having a really, big problem learning my B major scale on the trumpet. Like, oh, listen, this is what you got to do. And so just give them this one, sometimes very simple answer, but it's an answer they never get, received.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I've never thought about it that way. Oh, that really helped. Oh, wow. I want to know more. Is your studio open? And a lot of ways that's how I ended up building. But then I know we're going to talk about this, so I'll mention this as a part of the answer because it is part of the
Yeah.
answer. But me charging a lot closer to what I was worth was a really big thing. I thought, again, service, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. I thought I was keeping myself accessible by
Mm,
putting my prices down. And what I realized was that I not only was I not pushing people out by raising my prices, but in a very real way, I was inviting people in, which was something I really didn't understand. And I'm sure that a lot of musicians are like me and probably don't understand. So I will take the time to explain in a moment. But um, raising my prices made it easier for me to grow my studio. It didn't make
mm.
it harder, which was something that just blew my mind.
Well, it's amazing too, Marcus, because when we first started talking about how we were going to approach all of this and using like your social media as a reference point, you're talking about the service, like just wanting to provide value and information and like put the goodwill out in the world. And I feel like that's very aligned. It's something that obviously is we have worked on together that we're leading with in the program, right? Like one of the jokes we always make is like, don't send that random cold email to the school band director saying, I teach lessons, because they're not going to answer it. It's not helpful for them. Like you just some weirdo on the internet emailing them that they don't know, they don't trust. Like, why would they send children to you? That's a weird ask to make, right? But when we back it up with more of like a I'd love to help you. How can I help you? It's been a weird couple years, y'all. Like how can we work together in this music program and how can I support your community and your band? That like service attitude and leading with genuine desire to connect and help makes all the difference. And you were already doing this on your social media, but then we have to follow it up with an ask. Because we can go teach sectionals and master classes all day long at different schools and still not result in any students if then we're not following up and saying, I like you, I like your students, and I would love to work with them further. Here's how we can make that happen, or here's kind of my offer to you, and making it really clear. And there's one example that I can think of with you in particular where you made a TikTok, and I think it was something in response to one of my TikToks actually, but you made a TikTok that was about your students and the passion that you have for teaching private lessons. And I think within a week or two, you told me that that led directly to a student because you were talking about it. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Literally, I just posted a video talking about students, and then, yeah, I got a student. So, yep.
It's wild. And the directness, it does feel weird. Like I think that there's this, and I don't need to say this in a negative way, but there is this little like block for a lot of us as musicians because we do it for the love of the art first. We do it for the love of our students. And then it's really nice when we can make a living doing it. Like that's a really cool part of what we do, but we didn't go into music because we thought we were all going to be millionaires. Like that was not the main objective when we made that decision, end of high school, early college. But being direct is something that, and I'm not going to say everyone is great at this, but the rest of the world, all other businesses are more comfortable with, I think, than creatives and artists tend to be. And so we have to build a little bit of that resiliency and tolerance too around the direct ask. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't oftentimes think of ourselves as business owners, but we
Mhm.
offer a service, and that service is something that brings upon a benefit to our clients. And by the very definition, that is a business.
Yes.
So it needs an ask.
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, I joke on my social media all the time too. If you're filing a Schedule C, which means from any of your gigs, any of your teaching, any income that is paid 1099, you are legally considered a business and a service by the US government and the IRS. So, good golly gosh, you should actually start acting like it a little bit more. So, and the education system's broken. That's a whole other topic for another time. We won't go down that wormhole. I do want to talk about your ideal students though, because this was a big shift early on too, is not only being direct and like I have openings for students, but these are the students that I work with and these are the goals that they have and this is what we accomplish. When we sat down for the first time and jotted down all these notes about your ideal student, and I had that note sheet up right before we started recording from our first call, and like passionate, fulfilled by music, enjoy expression in music. They're open and they want to share and they're looking for more than band. Like we had all of these like really great descriptors that were so clear. Between your studio now and the studio, that you had previously even, and then what you were doing about 6 months to a year ago, what do you feel like has been the shift in you that has brought those students to you rather than the just anyone students?
When we took the time to sit down and define what that type of student was and to not be apologetic about it, and to allow myself to say, if the student is the perfect fit for me, that means I'm going to be able to give them the best that I have to offer. And if not, I can refer them to somebody else who can give them the best that they have to offer. And having that conversation and that realization allowed me to just completely view the way that I gave lessons in a completely different manner, essentially. That I was able to help all students who came to me. It didn't necessarily, I don't have to teach every student who comes to me. But if I give them what they need, then I've accomplished my task, whether it's me or not. So just not being afraid to, if a student doesn't fit that particular, ideal type of student that I want in my studio, to send them somewhere where they're going to be somebody else's ideal student and that they're going to get what they need. And of course, that also builds trust because they know that I have their best interests at heart. It's not about me. It's about helping them to succeed. And then the students who I, did accept into my studio, and I'll say the vast majority of them because they understood, once I started communicating, what I was looking for and seeking out those people. Most of the people who sought me out were the people who had those passions. But just the amount of energy that I get going into teaching is so different. And I was giving all that I had to offer previously. It was just that I was always stressed out and I was drained. and I wasn't able to make ends meet, but I was giving everything that I had. And so everything that I had was, I was thinking about multiple things at once. I was, again, tired and stressed and so on and so forth. And so, my best wasn't nearly as good as it is now. And so by being able to have the students that I know that I can help to the best of my ability, it helped to heighten my quality of teaching. And
Mm.
it also helped to heighten the likelihood that those students were going to see a positive benefit from those lessons. So ultimately, the value of the lessons increased dramatically. And I had thought, because I was, because people already trusted me, because I was teaching, my lessons were bringing success upon students um, previously, that yeah, this is fine, but it just makes so much of a difference when you are very careful about finding the students that are the right fit. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than just accepting everyone for the sake of accepting everyone and trying to help everyone. And I mean, there's so many things we can say about that, right? Like, you have a finite amount of energy, and the more students you bring in that whose goals don't align with yours, the more draining it is on that energy, and the more it affects everyone else. And so the more focused you are on aligning your goals with your students or your clients, since we mentioned business, but your particular students, you have those passions and dreams and goals. You feed off of that, because
Yes. Yes.
it's in aligned with your goals as well. And so being able to teach them becomes it becomes really, really easy to give your best self to those students.
Well, and it takes, I think it takes a lot of, I'm not saying maturity in like a negative sense that like previously we were immature. That's it's not that, but growing this confidence and maturity in saying, not only is this not the right fit for me, but I know there is a teacher who's a better fit. And I'm comfortable just telling this student, I wish it was me, but I really think that you should work with this other teacher. Like, they have the skill set that you're looking for. The vibe is there, even in personality wise. Like, we need to make sure it's a good fit, because I think back on teachers that I have had, however brief, that maybe were not the right fit, and how, as the student, that sucked the life out of my music making too. And like, gosh, I would never want to ruin music for someone because I forced the lesson just because I was looking for money, or like just because I was trying to like grow the studio, or because I thought I was trying to serve everybody or be more accessible. And that's actually a detriment to their learning process. And that's a hard feeling too. And you'd hinted earlier about how increasing your rates has helped with this a little bit. And I would love for you to speak a bit more towards your thoughts and kind of what you meant there too.
Yeah, of course. So raising my price did a couple of things I didn't expect. First of all, hold on. No, we'll back up. We'll give the story. We'll give the story. Okay, so I haven't told this part with you. So now we're sharing things we hadn't shared with each other. Before I decided to have this, before I decided to meet you for the first time, I had already had this decision in my mind. I was like, all right, cool. I need to do something about this. It had been something in
Mm.
my mind, like, I do need to raise my prices, at the very least, so that I can pay my bills, but also maybe there is some benefit here. I'd been, watching and listening. I follow a lot of business entrepreneurs, and a lot of finance, experienced financial people on social media, et cetera, and that type of thing. And so I've been hearing a little bit about, like, the price to value, and how they should, correlate with one another, and why it might be a good idea to raise your price. So anyway, in my mind, I thought, okay, cool. I'm gonna raise my price. A substantial amount, in my mind, substantial amount. And I think it was something somewhere around the neighborhood of like 50% more than what I had been charging for the
Mm.
majority of my career. Um, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make this transition. But then when I decided that I was going to invest my time and my heart and my energy, and trust my studio and my growth to outside the box, it then became this. I bet Kelly's gonna give me a recommendation, and I just, what, and I was telling my wife this, was like, I'm, meeting with Kelly from outside the box. If she gives me a number, I'm gonna trust her and do
Mm.
what she says. um,
Thank you for
and
that.
yes, because why on earth would I bring you on board? And then she's like, no, I disagree. But it's one of those things. I mean, sometimes pride and sometimes like, oh, but you don't know my situation. And there's a lot of reasons to why someone
Yeah.
would do that.
Oh, totally fair.
But I just thought to myself, like, she has experience in this. She has clients who she's done this with. I need to trust whatever it is that she says. That's why I'm meeting with her. So the number that you gave me was higher than the number that was in my mind. And the way that you said it was very again, very encouraging, but also very direct and kind of like piercing to me, like in a good way. But the piercing thing was like the truth that I had been undervaluing myself so aggressively, and that you came at it with,
Mm.
you have so much to offer. And so I think the quote that you had given me was like 65, 70% above what I had been charging previously.
Yeah,
And I
I'm looking at
remember,
those notes too. That's pretty spot on. Yeah.
I remember thinking, I said I was going to trust her. I'm going to trust her.
Hey,
I'm
can
just
we
going to trust
talk
her.
numbers? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Can we
let's talk
give pricing and
numbers.
rates? Okay, so
Yeah.
at the time that we met, you were charging $45 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that still hurts my heart. And teaching about 2 hours per week, again, looking at these notes, that was like $500 a month, roughly. Not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough. We love the students that we had, not enough.
Yeah.
We ended up running with 80 an hour. It's a huge jump, almost twice. I mean, that's almost double. Now, obviously, we're not taking your current students and doubling their rate. Like, let's make that abundantly clear. We didn't do that.
Not just showing up
awful.
1 week and going, hey, pay me twice as much.
Yes.
No.
That would break rapport. We're not doing that. But for all new students, we were coming in at that rate. And then we put that on a monthly flat rate. So it's about $3 a month to start. That has since increased, obviously, too, because we have a lot of other great things going on and a lot of good demand. And as it should, it is continuing to increase. But that has resulted now, as you're bringing in new students, in a lot more stable and secure revenue too. So not only did we raise the rate, but you built yourself a policy that is far more protective, not only of your income and your revenue, but also the relationship that you have with the student. So they are coming on a more regular basis. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And what shocked me, so it's funny that like, we talk about my previous students and whatnot, but like those students were excited for me for what I had started. And the majority of them just said, no, we'll pay the new rate. And they paid the new rate. And it was like, you deserve this. I can't believe you haven't asked this sooner, which was again, kind of piercing to me. And it was like, what have I been doing?
Everyone else sees it. Why don't I?
Yeah. And the first consultation I had with an incoming student, I remember thinking, I adore this student so much, and I'm going to tell her my rate and she's going to be like, I can't do this. And I remember just being like, trust Kelly, trust outside the box. I'm just going to do it, And then so, I said the rate, she did not bat an eye. It was just like, yeah, of course, obviously, like to everyone else, it was like, yeah, obviously. And we've been obviously working ever since then, and it's been just a really big joy to work. Actually, she just had a really successful college audition a couple of weeks ago. So we've had lots of victories together, which has been really fun and rewarding.
That's so exciting.
But yeah, very rarely did someone come to me and say, your lessons are too expensive. And when they did, it was individuals who weren't my ideal students anyway, which is fair, because the type of student I'm looking for is a student that's investing an amount of effort, that they're doing extracurricular activities, that they're maybe pursuing the career as a whole in the future and that type of thing. And that's a very different level of value than someone who maybe, for example, is picking up the instrument for the first time in 7th grade and needs to catch up because band started in 6th grade. Those level of skills are something that is coming from a very different place. So you wouldn't maybe necessarily think to charge the amount of money you would charge if you're setting someone up for a career in which they would actually make money in the future and have a return on that investment, versus someone who's just looking to catch up on their instrument with their colleagues. So I ended up when I raised the prices, I ended up attracting my ideal student by itself. That by itself was one of the really big factors for helping that show up. My students were more committed. They trusted me more, and they showed up willing to work more. And all of that came from, obviously, we changed, like you said, we changed the policies, and I felt just generally better about what I was offering, and that the students were the correct students. But those students were coming to me when I raised my price. And it wasn't until after I had made peace with that decision that I started attracting those ideal students.
There's two things I want to just like clarify for anyone who's listening and is thinking like, I don't understand how an increased rate could attract more ideal students. I think one of the things that Marcus is kind of dancing around here is like, yes, it's at a different investment level and people are paying more for it. But also when you price yourself more accurately for your background and your knowledge and your expertise, people look at that and say, I trust them more. Because like obviously he's getting that rate and he's confident in that rate, which means he's probably pretty dang good in what he does and gets the results. So there's part of that, and this is an interesting consumer mindset that we don't necessarily even have as musicians all the time. But when we look at an instrument, if you were going to buy a new trumpet tomorrow, that's not universally true, but usually the instruments that are more expensive are the better instruments. And so when you see something that's at a higher price point, even if it's not like your dream instrument, it's not what you want to buy, like there's that little voice in the back of your head that's like, man, I really wish I could have that. Like I'd rather, gosh, that Steinway is so beautiful compared to this Yamaha that probably also sounds amazing. And it's not a discredit to the Yamaha, but it's just like, that one's $50,000. Like you start to do that little math in your head. We all do it. And so part of that feeds this ideal student cycle. The other part of it on the flip side is if your rates are too low, then people look at you and say, oh, what's wrong with it? Like, why is it so low? Does he not have experience? Like, what's the catch if the price is too low because it feels too good to be true? So we're saying on one hand, like, I can get students ready for college auditions and I know my stuff, but then we're priced at such a low rate that it doesn't match what we're saying we're getting in results. So that is why the price point and ideal student are so closely tied together. One other point that I want to circle back to, when we first started together, we had a very frank conversation about that accessibility concern. And this is something I'm very passionate about, and people probably hear me talk about this from time to time on my own social media. We always recommend offering a scholarship rate when it's truly an ideal student who cannot afford your rate.
Yeah.
That was something that you had wrestled with early on, right? So
Yes.
share a little bit more about your feelings around that, like accessibility and why that's important to you too.
Yeah. So I believe that every student deserves the best in education, and as musicians, they should deserve the best in education in music. And that is my field. That is my wheelhouse. So it's, and that's part of why it was really hard for me to turn students down in the beginning, who maybe weren't an ideal fit. There are students who maybe are your perfect fit, who maybe truly can't afford lessons, and then in which case you can say, and this is the thing that you made sure that I understood as well. As long as I'm taking care of myself first, because if I'm not taking care of myself, then we get into the very similar problem where I start draining myself, and then I'm not able to give the best version of myself to that student or any of my other students. So the taking care of myself first, so like mentally, emotionally, financially, everything, and then from that being able to say, well, this student is a student that is my ideal fit and is someone that I really would like to teach, and I know that I can help a lot. And their circumstances just make it really difficult to make that happen. So I'm willing to work with those students on a scholarship basis. I did end up offering a scholarship to one of my students, and they ended up making things work financially anyway.
Wow.
And they ended up not needing it. It was one of those things where it was just like, we value this so much that it's worth it, and we're gonna do.
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna do what it takes, which is really humbling.
Very affirming. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But it's one of those things where, so I mean, if I were to ever come across a student like that, and like I mentioned with you, I mean, depending on where we go, 15 minutes in one direction or another direction, the socioeconomic background is drastically different, but the passion isn't necessarily different. And so if there's a student somewhere who is struggling to get shoes that fit them, then maybe it's going to be a much bigger challenge for them, for example, to get those lessons to help them reach their full potential as musicians, as someone who just lives 15 minutes south or 15 minutes west or whatever the case may be. And I don't want to say no to those students. So, having the opportunity to offer a scholarship, and it is kind of like it's kind of I don't want to say merit based. It's not like achievement based, but
No, no,
it's
no,
a
no.
fit. You know, it's one of
Right.
those like these students are going to have a really big benefit, you know, from taking these lessons. But then the really cool and amazing thing is my studio is going to benefit from that as well because that brings about, of course, case studies and testimonials, and people see the growth and the improvement. You know, especially
Yeah.
in a band or orchestra or choir setting, someone starts taking private lessons and then they show up and all of a sudden they play more confidently and they make better sounds and they go into district band or city band or county band or whatever, and they end up, you know, seeing successes that they weren't seeing before. It's very easy to be able to tell where the variable is and where that came from.
Yes.
And even if a student doesn't necessarily get quote unquote better, it's like, oh, they didn't get first chair district band or whatever, but they show
Yeah.
up just happier and more confident about what they do and more passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
um, you know, there's a really difficult passage in their music and they just went home and took the time to learn it and went back to band class, and the teacher's like, well, what's the difference? Well, I just enjoy it a lot more. And like they start talking about their lessons.
Yeah.
Right,
It
there's so
does
many,
make a huge
yeah,
impact. It
there's so
really
many
does.
benefits that comes from that, but those benefits happen when you find the ideal student and you offer that to the ideal student, and they may
Yes.
not necessarily happen anywhere else because that student is, you're making a value-based decision and when taking upon a student, and then those parents are making a value-based decision by accepting you. Otherwise it's a price-based decision, and when you're worried about price, um, you're not worried about the right things as a client or as a teacher, because the reason you have the service is so that you can improve. It's
Yeah.
not so that you can afford to, you know, that it's just not the right conversation to have. So the value is really big, and that comes from finding the ideal student. um, but yeah, anyway, it's been just knowing that I can do that has been a really liberating thing for me in finding the my ideal student and
Oh,
whatnot.
it just makes me so happy. I mean, the journey that you've been on the last few months is wild in the very, very best way. And there's been such massive growth in your business and you personally too. And I want to affirm that, just tell you how proud I am of you and like how excited I am for you. And it's just been incredible getting to work alongside you these last 6 months and see this happen in your studio. And I am overjoyed that this
Thank you.
is your current situation. Congratulations. It's
Thank you.
amazing.
Can I mention as well, like this summer, because that was the first of all, like summertime is generally harder to recruit students than during school, but my summer was really tough. Like there were a bunch of things going on from a personal side of things. I know you know a lot about it. I was getting, you know, sick off and on, and I was having curveballs being thrown at me and whatnot. And then of course I was working quite a bit of hours at a job that wasn't aligning at all with my music career. So a lot of that mental energy and physical energy and time was being taken away from it. So the things that we were focusing on, was a lot of hard work and I didn't have a lot of time, but the nature of how effective and efficient it was allowed my studio to grow despite the fact that I was fighting tooth and nail sometimes to just find time to sit down and write an email to send out to a
Yes.
band director to go visit.
Yes.
And all of these things are, so it's one of those, it's not like it was hard work, but I didn't have to sit down and go, oh, I'm going to put, you know,
Mm,
23 hours a day for, you know, 6 months. It
right.
was the focused work and, you know, just sort of getting out of my own way. And like we were talking about communicating with what I wanted, what I needed, who the ideal student was, so that they knew exactly who to look for as well. And communicating that trust. And when you market yourself that way, it also does the work by itself. You know,
Yeah.
I had a few students like we talked about come from social media, but a lot of them came from word of mouth, and a lot of them came from visiting and that type of thing. And it was because of that, you know, the time that I did have, because going through this program I was able to focus every minute of what I did. I ended up
Mm,
having that success. Whereas previously maybe I would have worked twice as long and not gotten the results. So I just wanted to mention that.
that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that and highlighting the effort that goes into this because it's not easy and I don't want to like sugarcoat it because it's certainly not a quick fix for all of our problems, but you put a lot of time and energy and effort in and obviously you are so deserving of all of the success that you're having and more. There's more coming. It's we're not done, but it's just so exciting to see that. I want to give people the opportunity, as we've talked a lot about your content, to find you on the internet if they're curious about what you're doing. So what is your website and your social media handles if people are looking for that?
Sure. My middle initial is S, so msgrantmusic.com is my website.
Perfect.
And so on my website, we talked about I'm a professional composer and whatnot. So I write a lot of music. I do content. So there's some of that as well. The main focus of my website is just showing some of the current events of the things I'm doing, but mostly showing the music that I've written. There is a tab for me teaching private lessons, which I'm actually currently in the process of updating. So it'll probably look different than it does now by the time people see this. But just offering, again, being very clear about my ideal student and the type of student I'm looking for, and then the resources I have to offer people. And I do have some free resources on my website as well, and I'm looking to add more. But then a lot of that is what I do as a content creator, is offering those resources as well for students. So all of my handles are MS Grant Music. So youtube.com/MS Grant Music, Instagram.com/MS Grant Music, TikTok/ at MS Grant Music, because they do the handles.
It's a different one.
And I've even taken, the ones that I don't use nearly as much, like Twitter, I have the account. I don't use it. You can find me there, but I don't use it. Threads, which I use ever so slightly more than Twitter, like once every,
When we remember it. Threads is there months. When you occasionally remember that it exists now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
but I use the content handles that I'm most motivated about sharing. And that's the thing, is like, I'm not trying to feel obligated, like I have to post content to be seen, but I post the right content in the right places for me and for my audience. So you'll see a lot of me on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. And again, MS Grant Music is all of those handles.
Thank you so much. Marcus, it's, as always, it has been a joy. Thank you so much for chatting with me today and sharing so much. I really hope this is helpful for people. I don't know how it wouldn't be. We covered a lot of ground today, so thank you. I really appreciate it. And congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
To see what you've done.
Thank you for everything that you've done to help. And it's my pleasure to be able to share with your audience. So I do hope it was really helpful.
Thank you.